Gary, can you tell me a little bit about your journey into cybersecurity and ultimately what you're doing right now?
Sure. So I started straight out of school. Wanted to work in technology. Saw a movie about hackers back in the early 80s. Thought it looked kind of cool what these people could do with computers, and wanted to learn everything about computers and computer languages. So I started by understanding programming languages. So I became a programmer, then networks and systems support and building PCs, and did that for about 10 years. So worked in IT specifically, but all the time helping my employers to write policies and procedures and such like so that we could understand the technology. And about 1997, somebody handed me the Data Protection Act and said, we need to make sense of this. Can you help us understand it? What does it mean for our business? And that was it. So done nothing else other than data protection, info security, cybersecurity is a subset of that, and privacy. And that's me. And yeah, that's my journey. What I'm doing now is I run a consultancy called Consultants Like Us, and we help organizations understand information security, cybersecurity, data protection, privacy in simple terms, how it relates to them, what they need to do, and how to protect themselves. So there you are.
Fantastic. And as we kind of head into 2025, what are some of those biggest threats and challenges that you're kind of seeing within the cybersecurity industry? What are you talking to your clients about at the moment?
Obviously, I've got to throw it in straight away, AI. So, thinking about the use of artificial intelligence within their organization for themselves. So, their understanding of what AI is, how it should be used or it can be used, its limitations, compliance issues, ethical issues that they might have around the use of AI. Um, but specifically thinking about threats and threat actors, of course, AI is being used equally by legitimate organizations, but by bad people, bad actors who they're using AI, so AI powered attacks. They are automating their attacks using AI. So definitely that is certainly a biggest one of the biggest threats and concerns, the lack of understanding of what AI is and how it can be used, how it can be weaponized. um, on top of that, you've got the other kind of issues around the world at the moment. You've got increases in ransomware and extortion, state-sponsored threats. Of course, there's a lot of global uncertainties around various different governments and wars and such like. So there's a lot happening. So it's both internal threats and issues about their own use of technology, but also those external larger issues that organizations need to be considering.
Definitely. Yeah, makes sense. And yeah, I did want to ask you about AI. So just kind of going a little bit deeper on that. Are there any sort of specific examples you can share with how organizations are using it for good and how maybe even organizations are using it for bad? And if there's any sort of stories or anything you can kind of share some light on where you've seen bad actors using it in a successful way as well. Anything you can share there?
Yeah, without disclosing any confidentialities, of course. I mean, AI, listen, AI is a technology, and like all technology, it's neither good nor bad. It just is. It's just in the hands of the user how it's being utilized. So everything I'm about to say to you is the bad actors are using it in the same ways. So automation, of course, AI is being used fantastically to automate mundane tasks. Automated response, chatbots, and such. Great use of that on websites and within organizations. But equally, bad actors are using AI to great effect for creating sophisticated social engineering chatbots. So I've seen and evidenced where bad actors are using it to, on scale, to be able to carry out those phishing attacks, those phishing attacks where they call you and say, you know, look, your Microsoft account or your whatever account has been hacked, and there's some suspicious activity on your bank accounts. I just need to be able to get onto your machine and be able to do so and so. And these chatbots are extremely convincing. So the AI tooling around that, you know, from a negative perspective, is quite concerning. But within organizations, you know, you've got enhanced threat detection, you've got incident response, you know, the ability for systems AI tooling, especially within networks, to be able to detect an incident or a particular threat or an attack and be able to respond to it before even raising the flag and coming to a human to intervene. We're just seeing those sorts of those use of AI massively coming into the arsenal of a cybersecurity practitioner. So some great examples of good actionable and activity from an AI perspective, but also, like I said, we're seeing the same kind of tools being used on the flip side of that coin.
Interesting. Okay, no, thanks for sharing. One of the things I wanted to get your insight on was the FTC safeguard rules. Could you tell me a little bit about what they are and why they're important, and just share any sort of insights on that topic?
Yeah, so this is so the FTC safeguard rules are specifically looking at organizations in the US. So they're relevant to any financial institution within the United States. So that's everything from a small accountancy firm through to larger banks and financial institutions. You might think of them from a UK point of view a little bit like the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. So the FTC is the Federal Trade Commission, and they set the rules about how data or how an organization should operate. So they set out these rules, and they've released and updated something called the FTC safeguard rules, which are very much around how organizations should think about confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data, and in particular data subjects, people like you and I, how they protect that information. And just like the FCA, they can levy fines against organizations who aren't operating effectively, who haven't put the safeguards in place. There's a lot of misinformation about FTC safeguard rules, unfortunately, that's happening, that we're seeing. And there's a lot of misunderstanding of what you have to do. In the UK and within Europe, I think because we've operated under GDPR for a good period of time, the General Data Protection Regulation, we understand sort of the principles of data protection and privacy a lot better than I would dare to venture that they do in the US, because obviously it's a big country, they have different laws and such. But the FTC safeguard rules kind of unify what their expectations are specifically for the financial sector.
Interesting. Okay, thanks for that. One of the things that people talk about when it comes to cybersecurity is having a strong cybersecurity culture. How can organizations foster a strong cybersecurity culture that engages all employees, not just the IT professionals or the security professionals that kind of know what they should be doing and protecting threats? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay. Yeah, this is it's a big topic, and a lot of people are talking about this need to, or this drive towards building a cybersecurity culture. Now, I think that every organization has a culture. So let's start at the basics. Every organization has a culture, even before we start talking about cybersecurity culture. So how can organizations foster a strong cybersecurity culture? Well, actually, I know this sounds counterintuitive, but stop trying to drive a cybersecurity culture. What you should be looking for is working within the culture that is already there and seeking to influence that culture by helping them understand the importance of what information security and data protection actually is. The problem is that all too often when people think about cybersecurity, they think purely in abstract terms. They think of technology, they think of IT, they think of mobile phones, they think of the IT team. It's their responsibility. It's not my responsibility. So when we couple the word cybersecurity and culture together, people just think, well, that's for the IT team to worry about. It's not for me to worry about. So how specifically can organizations do this, and how should practitioners like myself approach this topic? I always go into an organization and the first questions I ask are about the business. What's your objectives? What's your values? What's your mission? Most organizations will have those in one way or another, and some of them will be very, very, very tightly defined. And what we should be doing as practitioners within the industry is, how does cybersecurity support those values? How does it support the objectives within the organization? Because if the organization's values are on being fair and treating customers fairly, for instance, how does information security and data protection support that? How can we go to the organization to say, look, by only processing data in an appropriate way, in accordance with regulations and such, by doing that, we're actually demonstrating that we are treating customers fairly. You're making that cognitive link between the values that the organization has and has had way before you joined, and you're making that link between the two so that they actually say, oh, right, okay, I see the relevance of those things now. And that helps them to say, well, I embody the principles of cybersecurity and information security and data protection by treating customers fairly. So we need to explain to people why this is an important topic as well. And if you can explain to people why it's an important topic, and again, they can make that cognitive link between this is a real person that we're talking about here. It's not abstract. It's not ones and zeros and such. Then people will again begin to respect the data that comes across their desks, and they'll start thinking about it in a much more respectful way. That's, for me, the ways that you actually engage with people and have these kinds of conversations will only improve security if they become meaningful, and it has to have relevance to the individuals and the organization, and that's how you actually start to get people to think about security in a very real way.
Yeah. No,
There's a
that
lot
makes
in,
sense.
there's a lot
Yeah.
in there, there's a lot to unpack in that. But I often say to people, stop forcing this thing, stop banging your head against a brick wall and trying to implement a cybersecurity culture. I worked with a law firm a few years ago who they've been in place for 100 years. 100 years. And this was an organization that, that law firms, as you can imagine, they're steeped in culture and a way of operating and a way of working, that if I come along and just say, hey guys, you all need to now start paying attention to this over here, without clearly understanding how they already operate and the language that they use and the tone in which they write their policies, it's going to fall on stony ground. So the approach I took at a law firm was completely different to another client that I worked with in the same week, who were young, dynamic. No one was above the age of 30. They were web developers and designers. They were all about agile and being dynamic and fun and energized. If I would have just gone in and said, right, we're going to implement a cybersecurity culture in those two organizations in the same way, wouldn't have worked.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think as well, it's having that executive buy-in. Like when you kind of mention about like aligning it to business goals and business objectives, if the executives can get behind it and support it, then it sort of filters down through the rest of the organization as well, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, there's some very practical things you can do. You know, you've got to have clear policies and procedures. Like I said, there's a lot to unpack here. But so when we go into organizations, we look at the policies. And again, going back to this very small organization that were young and dynamic and such, and they'd just bought some templates and they'd put them in place and they said, you know, we don't really understand them, but we know we've got to have them. They were, you know, policies that were 10, 15 pages long, acceptable use policies and such. And we just sat down and just said, does this speak to you? Does it make sense to you? And they were like, well, not really, no. Well, let's make the language your own language. Let's make them clear. That's the buy-in you're going to get from the board, because suddenly, again, the board are understanding of why this is important. And ultimately, how does it help them achieve what they need to do?
Yeah.
People forget, they seem to think that the board is some abstract thing that sits at the top of an organization. These are people. So when I sit down with the board, both individually and collectively, I'll ask them, what do they want? What do they want to achieve out of their security program? So that's my advice to anyone here is, what do you want out of your security program? What do you want it to help you achieve? Now, if you think about your board of directors, think about the boardroom, think about the people sat around that table. And you've got someone from HR, you've got someone from operations, you've got someone from sales, and so on and so on and so on. And of course, you've got IT, hopefully. What does each person want around that table? When I've sat with a board, I've had them say, we need to achieve, 25% growth next year. We're going to penetrate America. We're going to be doing this. We're going to move to this platform. We're going to be doing these things. We've got to have this much attrition or retention in staff. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm now getting a picture of the kind of individual things. But then when I've sat down with them individually, I remember one of the directors just sat there and just said, I'd like my weekends back.
Oh, wow.
I'm fed up of getting phone calls on a Friday or a Saturday saying to me, "Oh, we've had this IT outage, or we've had this network issue, or we've had a ransomware attack, or we've had this." And you kind of go, right, okay, you want your weekends back? Okay, well, there's some things we can do here. What does your incident response look like? Can we do something more around the preventative side of things and the alert messaging, and where do you sit in the hierarchy? Do you need a phone call every Friday or Saturday if you've just had a minor blip on the networks? That's when the board start going, yeah, this is really important, because if I get behind this, then I get my weekends back.
Yeah.
They're human, just like you and I. They've got wives, partners, lives. They've got sports they want to do. They want personal objectives. What is it that they personally want? And if you can tap into that, that's how you get board support. And if you get board support, then that can help drive the culture. But it all starts with those simple conversations. Like I said, there's a lot to this driving culture, but it comes right down to really understanding the business's values, objectives, mission, and then individuals' imperatives.
Yeah, interesting. No, I like that answer. Good answer, Gary. Thank you. You kind of spoke obviously a lot there about the human side of things. What about when it comes to technology? So, what are some of those new technologies that CISOs are looking to invest in at the minute, or whoever it might be that's in charge of security in the organization? And how do they kind of like marry up against budgets? Do you see any trends at the minute where people are investing in something heavily or reducing investing on another tool? Any insights there?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a drive towards that single pane of glass, that having a unified security platform that gives you a dashboard that tells you what's actually happening on your network, and any what the external threats and what's coming in, what's going out. So I see a lot of investment around data loss or data leak preventative tools and technology, but certainly that unified security platform, SOCs and SIEMs, those kinds of technologies, I think, in terms of trends, I don't think that's anything new, to be honest with you. And I think as we continue into 2025 and beyond, I think that that's only going to increase the importance, because people again are being pushed to the fringes of networks, and our networks and our systems are only becoming ever more increasingly complex. So having a unified view of what's actually happening, I think is that's the trend. I think that what I'm certainly seeing. I often say to people, you can't protect what you don't understand, and you need visibility about what's actually happening on your networks. But also you need visibility in people's use of technology as well. So again, how many emails are going out of your organization, how many emails are being misdirected. So using tools like egress, for instance, would be the kind of thing where it gives you a good, clear understanding of what emails are going out and what attachments are going out, and you can set it up so that they have preventative and detective tools as well. So obviously other platforms are available, but these sorts of tools are invaluable, I think. But having a single pane of glass or a single view of what's going on in your network and within your business, I think is key. You asked a follow-up question to that, or an additional piece around budgets.
Yeah, it was just really, do they marry up with budgets? Like these investment, like obviously threats keep increasing. Our budgets kind of increasing in line with what the investments are needed to be to make the organization secure.
I think to be honest with you, I'd revert back to a previous answer that I gave about culture.
Mm.
The places where I see a good budget in place is where the need for good information security has been clearly explained. If you're sat there saying the board won't give me money, I want to spend it on this particular technology, don't blame the board. It's not the board's fault. You just haven't explained the value. This is one of the reasons why I went into I did a talk recently, and I actually stood there and I just said, I'd be interested in what roles people have here. And, it was like, oh, there's developers, there's system administrators, there's CISOs, there's whatever. And I just said, put your hands up if anyone from sales. And no one put their hands up. And I said, well, actually, you're wrong. You're all in sales. Every single one of you is in sales, because you got to sell the concept of good information security to your board, or to your senior leadership team, or to whoever, to your business. You have to explain it in ways that make sense to the business so that they understand the value of it. And if they understand the value and the purpose and the need for it, then budget, it becomes immaterial, because I clearly understand it. If someone comes to me and says, Gary, here's a device, you need to have this. Well, okay, how much is it? Well, it's £5. Okay, why do I need it? Why am I spending £5 with you? Well, it'll allow you to do this and this and this and this. If you can't clearly explain to me why this is worth £5, I'm not going to spend £5 with you. One, because I'm a Yorkshireman and I'm very careful about what I spend. But more importantly, you haven't articulated the value that it's going to give. So don't lament and blame the board for you having a poor budget. You need to be able to articulate it in ways that make sense to them. And just coming out with stats like every 39 seconds an organization is hacked, or by 2025 the global cybersecurity cost of breaches will be $10.5 trillion. It's like, okay, this is abstract stuff. It makes no sense to me. But if you can go back to them and say, by spending this money, you'll get your weekends back. By spending this money, it'll help us achieve the objective of growing the business by 25%. That's why it's so important to understand the values and the objectives of the organization and the individuals.
Definitely. Yeah, it should enable business, which I think has always been a challenge, and people need to communicate that. You're right.
I actually had one person say to me recently why they wanted to implement a solution, a technical solution within an organization. And I said, but why do you want to do that? And their response was, it makes my job easier.
Mm.
And I was like, okay. You kind of, I don't know if you just put yourself out of work there, because if you it's like, if you make your job easier, what else are you doing to add value to the organization? If it's only to make your job easier, that's not a compelling enough story to go to your board with.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. Interesting. Okay, so just one last question, Gary. We're kind of going back to where we started here. Like, so when people are looking to join the cybersecurity industry, it's a big industry. It's a lot more mainstream now than it was 20, 30 years ago. What advice can you share to people out there that perhaps are, I don't know, studying, they might be at secondary school, or they might be doing their A levels, even going to university. How can they get started in cybersecurity? Yeah, what can you advise them on?
Well, I always feel a bit of a fraud on this one, because I went straight out of school straight into a job. Well, I went onto a youth training scheme. It was called a YTS at the time. So a government funded thing, and so an apprenticeship, if you like. So I didn't go to university, but obviously I know a lot of people who've gone to university. And what I would say is that university is great, but university simply tells me that you know how to do research, that you can stick to a topic for a period of time, and that you can put together your thoughts in a cohesive structure. So university is great, but I think in this modern day and age, there's two pieces of advice I would give anyone. One is, go and get some relevant info security, cybersecurity type qualifications. I would advise anyone who's thinking of moving into this sector, including those who've been at university, to look at, say, CompTIA Security Plus. That's a great foundation tool, and when I say foundation, please don't underestimate what I mean by that. It's easy or basic. It's just great, a solid foundation upon which to build. There are other tracks you can take depending upon what is it that you're interested in. If you're very much into the technology side of things, then you might want to go and look at some ethical hacking courses that you can take and such. But things like CEH is a good one, for example. But CISP, Certified Information System Security Professionals, CISM, if you're more into wanting to go into management, so Certified Information Security Management type, so CISM, CISP, they're kind of much broader topics and give you a good overview of the industry. But start with CompTIA. So anyone moving into this area, CompTIA, go and take a look. They've got dozens, if not hundreds, of great courses, but I would always start with Security Plus. The other piece of advice I would give to anyone is just do what I did. So I did, these kind of courses weren't available when I first started. So I just became a sponge, and I continue to be a sponge. So I soak up as much information as I possibly can. I read as if my life depends upon it. Every book that I can get my hands on that is of interest. So everything from talking about AI, everything through to technology in terms of open source development. So programming through to systems, through to more topical things like AI and such. Cyber psychology is an area of particular interest. Risk management, ISO 27001 frameworks. So anything like that, be a sponge. Read books, watch YouTube, listen to podcasts, and that's where you need to be. And the third and final piece of it is network. Go on LinkedIn, follow people, lurk more online, go to forums, sit and listen, gather notes, and follow interesting cybersecurity practitioners and people that seem to make sense to you. So formal training, informal training, and networking. They're the kind of the holy trinity of anybody who's wanting to come into this industry.
Perfect. Sounds good, Gary. I like it. Great advice.